Hi people! Today I am bringing you the last review of the summer kind of late or delay reviews that I owed you, which is a combined review only centered around two Jane Austen novels, and I cannot wait to share it with you. And oh, maybe you don't know who I am, that's it, right? My name is Clara, and if you want to accompany me through these spoiler-free reviews of two of the most remarkable writer during a really long time, specifically if we are talking about romance, we are going to have so much fun. By the way, if you subscribe or give me a like, I will be really thankful for that. Of course, you can comment down below and tell me what do you think about these two books that I'm going to mention. But first of all, if you want to subscribe, don't forget to click the bell in case you don't see my notifications. YouTube is doing weird things, so just in case, prevent you from missing stuff. Ready? We are going to talk about Pride and Prejudice and Emma. I am so hyped. So, I know that a lot of people know Jane Austen, which is author of the Regency era, if I am not mistaken. I always get confused when literary kind of periods are named, because when these things happen, it's because they are canon and they are important, and people get easily offended or hurt when you mistake them. But yes, she was a Regency author, and she was very prominent in her life. But I think I started knowing who she was when I was 12 or 13 years old, because one of my English tutor professors, she discovered that the way I cope and learn better is through books. So she introduced me to this world, and the first book I read was Pride and Prejudice. I read it in my mother tongue, which is Spanish, but I remember that I didn't like it very much, which was weird. But a few years ago, 3 years ago, I was living in England doing a master, and my flatmate gave me this kind of beautiful cloth-bound edition that I have over there, maybe in the higher shelf, by Penguin Classics, and I started, but I never got to finish it. So this year I read it completely, and I remember that I was amazed by this, and I was completely amazed because when I read it this year, I discovered that I had more knowledge. I was more mature than when I tried to read it years ago, and I actually read it in Spanish. But not only that, my English level was very high, so I could get this kind of references and tiny jokes, very subtle jokes, or very subtle critics, which is one of the most iconic elements or characteristics, in my opinion, that Jane Austen used with prose. She was very critical about the society and the role that women had to play in society. In case you don't know, Pride and Prejudice tells the story of Elizabeth Bennet, the second elder daughter of the Bennet family, and her sister and her sisters and herself are in a very tricky position, because back then, if you were a woman, you couldn't like inherit your father possessions. It went through or it went directly to a male relative. But this family doesn't have any kind of brother figure, so her Lizzie's mom is basically very, very focused on getting everyone married, getting all the sisters married. So everything changes when a young and rich man, Mr. Bingley, arrives to the part of the country that they are living. So he brings with him his sisters and also his best friend, Mr. Darcy, who is even richer. But Mr. Darcy is not very kind of extrovert, so throughout the whole novel, I'm not going to spoil anyone because even though it's a classic, maybe you didn't have the chance to read it. Through the whole novel, you could see a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of using the title, a lot of prejudice and a lot of pride, and a lot of tricky situations in which Lizzie discovers or finds herself being a very independent woman, taking the context into account, which actually vexes her mother because she is not very into you must do what you want to do, but you instead Mrs. Bennet believes that if a good situation is presented to their daughters, they should go directly and accept that. So Lizzie has very, very clear said at the beginning of the novel that if it's not by by being loved and being respected, she's not going to marry anyone, which is a really bold statement taking into account the context that we're talking about. And later on, I read Emma, which I have a really old version of Emma. I think it's from 1979. That I bought in a second-hand book fair in Lewes when I was living in England, and I really love that edition. My interest in reading Emma, even though I always thought she was my least favorite heroine on Jane Austen universe, it's because as a classic, a lot of adaptations have been done, and a few years ago when I was in England as well living, I discovered the Lizzie Bennet Diaries first and Emma Approved, which are two YouTube TV series produced by Pemberley Digital. This is not sponsored by Pemberley Digital at any means, but they are two of my guilty pleasures whenever I have the chance to rewatch them. So I remember being in England and being a little bit bored, and I got into this kind of Emma Approved loop. Emma Approved is actually a kind of 21st century version of Emma. It's an adaptation of Emma, which is really good, and actually it took all my prejudice about Emma and Emma as a character out of the question because I went directly to the book fair and I bought my copy. I bought it because in this case Emma tells the story of Emma Woodhouse, a normally kind of single child in a beautiful home where she has everything she needs. She is a wealthy girl, a very, very healthy girl as well. She has a very caring parent, and she doesn't have the need of getting married. Instead, she uses her talent in matching to match all her friends with their perfect kind of husbands. The problem comes around when she meets Harriet Smith, and she decided to make her kind of protege, and she decided to make her a lady, to transform her into a lady, and also she's determined to find a husband for her. And things get a little bit tricky because, as in all Jane Austen novels that I've read so far, misunderstanding has a really big plot, or is a really big element in the stories. However, comparing Pride and Prejudice and Emma, I feel like Emma is better better presented, not only because the characters have a lot more development throughout the whole story, but the style is, even though I love Pride and Prejudice and I always going to love it, I feel like the style in Emma is very, very improved. You could see that Jane Austen actually was a more mature writer, and she used different kind of techniques that we never read before. For example, there are parts in which you have the narrator explaining the situation, explaining a part of the story, but then you have an internal monologue inside Emma's heart, for example. So you can hear what Emma is thinking or feeling as if she was the one explaining it to you, doing a monologue directly to you. So there's no monologues in the rest of the stories, I think. There's no internal kind of thinking sentence to say. Maybe I'm wrong, but not in the ones that I've read so far. So the plot is more uses intrigue more. The kind of the criticism in here is not as clear as in Pride and Prejudice. The character of Emma is more complex. Is very, very flawed, which is not very common in my opinion, within Jane Austen main female protagonist. It is true that you have some traits in, for example, Marian from Sense and Sensibility. You can see that she is driven only through or with her heart, so that's why she's making all the decisions that she's making, and it can be a flaw, but that's easily turned into a virtue because she discovers love using her heart, even though she goes through a really long and traumatic experience. But I feel like Emma is complicated or more complex than the rest of the characters because she's very flawed. She makes a lot of mistakes throughout the story. She's very stubborn, and unless the people tell me otherwise, I feel like she's trying to do what she believes is best, but she uses means that weren't that nice. And I also feel like, on the contrary with Pride and Prejudice, which is the story that I'm placing this opposite to, this neighborhood of Emma's environment is more complex. It's more crowded, so you have more characters to play with. There are more subtle and more complex stories, such as monetary need, the importance of status, which are very present in Pride and Prejudice and also in Emma, but also the idea of being a good friend, of being useful, of being kind of a good advisor. Also the idea of not or trying to mend people's hearts, but mending sometimes doesn't mean playing or picking another tutor. It means like let them decide. The idea of the free will. But Emma thinks that Harriet, because Harriet is in Emma's thoughts initially inferior to her, Emma doesn't allow the rest of the characters to think by themselves. So that's one of the matters that I feel that are more prominent. I feel like I love both of them, but I was more impressed by Emma, also because of the complexity, as I said before, of the characters, of the neighborhood, of the secondary characters and the themes. But I feel like there's a lot of things we should explore with Jane Austen that goes farther and farther away from the, cheesy romance novels that we normally take Jane Austen novels to be. And it's not that. Or at least for me, Jane Austen is actually about trying to make the society better. Maybe it's not what happens in the novels, but I feel like it inspires the readers to realize about the mistakes society forced you to do, and maybe think twice before thinking ill about someone else. This is what I think about Pride and Prejudice and Emma. I hope you like it. And if you have read any of these books or any of Jane Austen books and you want to give me your opinion on the matters, on the characters, who is your favorite character and why? And maybe you can tell me which book pick up next, because I think I have the rest of the novels by Jane Austen, but I haven't read Persuasion, Mansfield Park, or Northanger Abbey, so you can pick between those three. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I can see you next week. Bye!